Okay, so let's unpack this. You know that really specific feeling of being in a waiting room?
Like at a doctor's office.
No, no, not a doctor's office. I mean, that existential waiting room. That feeling where you're just tapping your foot, checking your watch.
And just scanning the horizon for something to finally arrive.
Right. There is this tension, this heavy expectation. You are here, but the main event, the thing that is supposedly going to make sense of everything is, well, it's just not here yet.
Is that defining feeling of anticipation, but mixed with, honestly, a little bit of anxiety. Like you were ready to go, the bags are completely packed, but the train just hasn't pulled into the station.
Exactly. Now, I want you to imagine doing that, but with something much, much bigger than a train. We are talking about a massive shift in consciousness, a cultural tipping point. For years, the sources we follow for this deep dive, articles, forums, philosophical discussions, they've all been talking about this great unveiling.
Or waiting for a critical mass of people to finally wake up.
Yes, it's been this collective holding of breath. But here's where the source material for today flips the script entirely. The main thesis isn't about how much longer we have to wait.
The headline here is that the wait is over.
Boom. That's it. We aren't looking for the train anymore. We are the train.
Metaphorically speaking, of course.
Yeah.
But yes, the source makes a really bold claim. We are no longer looking for the shift because we are the shift. The numbers, the critical mass, they are actually here right now.
So today our mission for this deep dive is to explore this transition in detail. And we aren't just going to skim the surface here. We are going to look at how we went from these individual, incredibly isolated spiritual awakenings where, frankly, everyone felt a little bit crazy, to this collective, grounded reality we are seeing today.
We'll trace the history of concepts like shadow work, how it moved from the absolute fringe to the mainstream. We will look at why that feeling of being the only one has basically dissolved, and probably most importantly, how the central question of this whole movement has changed.
Right, going from am I alone to how do we build together?
Exactly.
And just to set the tone here right off the bat, because I know when we say words like awakening or unveiling, it can sound a little abstract, a little woo-woo, but this deep dive is actually about tangible cultural shifts. The source calls it grounded creation.
Yeah, we aren't just talking about vibes here, though the energy shift is definitely a big part of it. But we are looking at a sociological pattern of convergence. It's about how these internal changes in people are starting to result in real external changes in our systems. Education, finance, local community.
But to understand where we are, we kind of have to understand where we came from. So let's rewind a bit. The source calls this first era the lonely beginning. And honestly, just reading through the descriptions of this phase, it felt really heavy.
It paints a very vivid picture. The source emphasizes that this awakening didn't just start yesterday. It started years ago.
Yeah.
Very quietly. And it certainly wasn't a group activity.
Yeah, and for everyone, the entry point was totally different. The text mentions that for some people, it was super dramatic, like a breaking point.
A major life crisis, maybe a divorce, or a profound moment in nature, or even a specific ceremony.
Right. But then for others, it was just this slow unfolding, just day by day, sort of noticing that the narratives they were being fed by society simply didn't match reality anymore.
But regardless of the entry point, the common denominator back then was total isolation. The source describes it as a time where sharing your insights about systems or energy or consciousness, it just made you the odd one out. You were operating on a completely different operating system than everyone else around you.
Oh, totally. I call it the glitch in the matrix phase. I think so many of you listening can relate to this. You'd be at a dinner party, right? And everyone's talking about the news cycle or the weather, and you'd say something about the underlying energy of a situation. Or maybe you'd question the entire structure of the 9-to-5 grind.
And the room would just go completely silent.
Exactly. People would look at you like you literally had three heads.
Precisely. And that external reaction creates a very difficult internal monologue. The source highlights those prevailing thoughts people had. Am I alone in this? Is anyone else seeing this? Or am I just imagining the cracks in the world?
It's basically a massive gaslighting effect. When the world is moving at one speed, just business as usual, and you feel like you are moving at a totally different frequency, you really do start to doubt your own sanity. The source describes it as feeling fragmented and slow.
Like you're watching a movie where the audio is out of sync with the video.
Yes. And that disconnection is incredibly painful. Humans are social creatures. Being the outlier triggers this primal fear of abandonment. And here's where the source offers a really crucial insight. This period of isolation wasn't wasted time. It wasn't just sitting around waiting for others to catch up,
Right. Work was being done in the dark. This is where we get into the concept of shadow work.
which is a term we hear all the time now. But let's define what the source actually means by it in this specific context, because it's not just, thinking about your feelings.
No, not at all. Shadow work is the grueling process of looking at the parts of yourself you would much rather hide. Your ego, your trauma, your own complicity in the very systems you dislike.
It's the messy stuff. It is not the Instagram-friendly version of spirituality with the crystals and the sage. It's the 3 a.m. panic attacks, the really deep introspection.
Exactly. Inner child healing. Ego integration.
Huh.
The source argues that while the rest of the world seemed to be sleeping, these isolated individuals were doing the absolute heavy lifting of facing the dark parts of themselves. They were basically clearing out their internal basements.
Which is just exhausting work to do all by yourself. But that brings us to the turning point. Section 2 of our deep dive today, the shift to critical mass. Because according to our source, the am I crazy phase is officially done.
The exact phrase used in the text is, now everything looks different.
So let's talk about this concept of critical mass, because I think people often get this wrong. They hear awakening and they think it means 100% of the population holding hands and singing songs together.
Or they think we need 51% of the vote to win an election.
Right.
That is a very common misconception. The source is very clear on this point. The awakening was never about reaching everyone. It was about reaching enough people. In sociology and physics, critical mass is just the minimum amount of material or people needed to sustain a chain reaction.
Right. And once you hit that number, the momentum shifts completely, regardless of what the majority is doing. And the central argument here is that that percentage has been reached.
Okay, but I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. I love a good theory. But if I turn on the news tonight, it really doesn't look like we've reached some harmonious critical mass. It looks pretty chaotic. So where is the actual proof?
That is the right question to ask. The source points to what we might call digital proof.
Yeah.
And this acts as the bridge between that deep isolation we just talked about and this new collective reality. It mentions screenshots, posts, comments, private messages. I was reading that part of the source and it really clicked for me. It's not just about one viral post. It's about the synchronization. You'll see a thread on social media where thousands of people are saying, wait, I just realized this exact thing about my family dynamic yesterday, or I just started questioning the banking system this week, and everyone is chiming in from totally different parts of the world.
That is what the source calls the convergence.
Mm-hmm.
It's described as undeniable because it's statistically improbable. We are seeing the exact same thoughts, realizations, and questions appearing independently all over the globe at the exact same time. It completely destroys the illusion that you are the only one thinking these things.
It's like a synchronized swim team, but for human consciousness. And seeing 10,000 likes on a random comment that articulates exactly what you felt in your soul, that changes the game, it validates the glitch.
It does. And it's not just talk anymore. Millions of people are walking it. They are healing, questioning, and rebuilding. The source notes that the energy has shifted from seeking to knowing.
It's interesting you mention walking it because the source talks about a very specific change in the overall vibe. It says the energy has changed from hype or fear to something completely different.
Grounded and stabilizing. That is the key distinction the author makes. In the early days, discovery can feel chaotic, even exciting in a frantic way, like, oh my God, everything is alive.
Yeah, the panic phase.
Right. But now it's recognition. It is the realization that this movement actually has the capacity to manifest something tangible. It's not just an internet trend. It's a structural change in the human operating system.
Which leads perfectly into how this is showing up in the mainstream. Because, let's be honest, terms that used to be considered super fringe are now things your accountant might just casually bring up at a meeting.
It is the absolute normalization of the fringe. The source lists specific examples: nervous system mastery, inner child work, shadow work. These aren't reserved for esoteric spiritual retreats in Bali anymore. They are entering standard, everyday spaces.
Let's actually pause on nervous system mastery for a second, because that sounds very medical. But in this context, it's really about emotional regulation, isn't it?
It is. It's the ability to remain calm and regulated in a highly chaotic environment. It's about not being reactive when the old systems start to shake and crumble around you. 5 years ago, if you talked about regulating your nervous system in a corporate boardroom, they would laugh you right out of the building.
Oh, absolutely.
But now, it's seen as a highly effective leadership skill.
Totally. And inner child work is basically just understanding why you react to things based on your past programming.
Right.
It's becoming practical mental hygiene. Honestly, it's like brushing your teeth. But it goes deeper than just having a new vocabulary, right? It's translating into behavior.
Yes. People are actively refusing to participate in unconscious systems. There is a very conscious choice happening in how time, energy, and money are being spent. And this shifts the entire collective conversation. Remember that old question we talked about? Is anyone else seeing this?
Right. The lonely question.
That has been replaced entirely. The new question is, how do we organize? How do we collaborate? How do we build together?
That is such a massive pivot. It changes everything from me to we. It stops being about my personal awakening and starts being about our shared future.
And it moves from observation to action, which is the critical step.
Which brings us to the so what of this deep dive. Section 4, grounded creation, because this is where the rubber finally meets the road. The source talks about a great migration into New Earth. Now, when they say migration, are we talking about everyone literally packing up and moving to a farm in Idaho?
Not necessarily, though I'm sure the real estate market in Idaho might suggest some people are doing exactly that. But here, migration refers to a migration into new systems. The source emphasizes that this isn't just an internal state of mind anymore. It is actionable, structural, and deeply collaborative.
Let's list some of these tangible alternative systems mentioned, because I think this is where it gets really exciting. This is the proof in the pudding for the listener.
Well, we have homeschooling. That is a huge one right now, taking education back into community hands, and not just to shelter kids, but to actively teach them differently. Then there are conscious communities, local barter systems, and completely alternative economies.
It's basically people looking at the standard default way of doing things, the public schools, the big banks, the corporate grocery stores, and saying, I think we can do this better. Or at the very least, we can do it differently.
Exactly. They're actively questioning major institutions, politics, fiat money, mainstream media narratives. But, and this is the crucial nuance the source makes, they are doing so while simultaneously creating solutions.
That is a huge distinction. I really want to flag this for everyone listening. The source defines the attitude here not as rebellion. It is not about burning down the old system or standing outside a building with a protest sign.
No, the text explicitly says it is not rebellion, anger, or escape. It defines it as maturity and grounded creation. Rebellion is often purely reactive. You are fighting against something, which means that thing still controls your focus and your energy. Grounded creation is proactive. You are building something new because you've simply outgrown what was there before.
I really love that word, maturity. It's kind of like the difference between a teenager running away from home because they hate their parents versus a young adult moving out because they are genuinely ready to build their own life.
That is a very fitting analogy. And the source breaks this down into daily applications. Because it's not just the big sweeping stuff, it's who you choose to do business with, who you raise your children alongside, who you partner with, where you put your daily energy.
It's the micro decisions. It's not just going to a voting booth once every 4 years. It's voting with your attention and your resources every single day. It's realizing, hey, I don't have to support this massive company that doesn't align with my values. Or I can trade vegetables with my neighbor instead of buying the plastic-wrapped ones shipped from across the globe.
Precisely. It is the realization that you are the active architect of your immediate reality. And when millions of people start acting as architects simultaneously, the entire skyline changes.
Now, we do have to touch on the specific spiritual context provided in the source material, because while we've been very grounded in sociology and behavior so far, the source does come from a specific worldview regarding the, quote, evolution of souls.
Yes, and we need to look at this impartially to understand the full narrative arc the source presents. It explicitly mentions that the last couple of years have been orchestrated by God, or the Most High, depending on the terminology you prefer.
And it describes that recent period in a way that I think will resonate deeply with a lot of people who felt like they were just going through the ringer. The text frames it not as random bad luck or pointless suffering.
It uses very intentional words like stripping away, pruning, and clarifying. The core idea presented is that what felt like breaking was actually preparation. What felt like unbearable isolation was actually calibration.
That is such a powerful reframe. Isolation was calibration. But I do want to push back on that slightly, or at least play devil's advocate for the listener, because when you are in the middle of a massive life crisis, a divorce, a job loss, a terrifying health scare, hearing that it's just a calibration can feel a little bit dismissive of the trauma. Does the source acknowledge the actual pain of that process?
It does, but it contextualizes the pain within a larger framework of growth.
Hmm.
Think about a gardener pruning a rose bush. If the rose bush had feelings, it would feel like it's being brutally attacked. It would think, why are you cutting my branches off?
Right.
But the gardener knows that cutting back the dead weight is the only possible way to ensure the bloom in the coming spring. The source essentially argues that humanity was full of dead weight, illusions, false dependencies, rigid ego structures, and that all of it simply had to go.
So the pain was the necessary stripping away of the things that weren't real or sustainable anyway?
Correct. That's the argument. And the source argues that this difficult process was absolutely necessary to get us to the current state. It states that millions are now conscious and aligned.
And I do appreciate this honesty in the text. It explicitly says they aren't perfect or fully healed. We aren't all walking around as enlightened beings floating 3 inches off the ground.
No, perfection isn't the requirement here. The source says they are simply ready to co-create, and that this basic readiness is enough to be the tipping point. You don't need to be perfect to build a house. You just need to know how to hold a hammer and be willing to work with the person standing next to you.
So if we look at the big picture we've covered today, we have moved from a scattering of isolated individuals who thought they were glitches in the system to a calibrated, massive group of people who are ready to build.
That is the exact trajectory. From am I crazy to let's get to work.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, right now? If we summarize this journey, we are seeing a total collapse of that waiting room mentality we started this deep dive with.
We truly are. The source is ultimately very empowering because it removes the excuse of waiting. If the numbers are here, if the critical mass is already achieved, then the permission slip has already been signed. You don't need to wait for a leader or a politician or some spiritual guru to tell you it's time to start.
I keep going back to that image of the Great Migration. It's not about running away from society. It's a structural shift. It's an energetic shift into entirely new ways of exchanging value and supporting each other.
It's about taking radical responsibility. If the systems we relied on are broken, as the source heavily suggests, the mature response isn't to just complain about them on the internet. It is to replace them with systems we build ourselves, right alongside this new community that we now know absolutely exists.
We are no longer waiting for the cavalry. We are the cavalry.
Or, to use the source's own language, we waited for numbers, and now we are the numbers.
That honestly gives me chills. It puts the ball so firmly in our court. So here is a final provocative thought to leave you with today. If the source is right, if the waiting really is over, if the critical mass is here, and if you are part of that number, what happens tomorrow morning?
It raises a very real question for everyone listening.
Exactly. We want you to look at your own life. Look at the systems you interact with every day. Your work, your kids' schools, where you buy your food, how you trade your precious time.
If you accept the premise that you are now a builder and not just a passive observer,
Then what specific broken system in your own life are you now ready to replace with something you build yourself? Not something you ask permission for, but something you just roll up your sleeves and start building.
because the numbers are there to support you. You aren't building in the dark alone anymore.
The wait is over. Go build something. Thanks for diving in with us.
See you next time.